And hello, Hearts of Oak. Welcome to another interview coming up with Anni Cyrus, who rejoins us after being with us a year ago. And last year we focused purely on Islam as the ideology as a religion. This time we focus more on the geopolitics. And we really start with Islam dropping off the agenda, why that's so, with the rise of the focus on COVID tyranny, China, press freedoms, and free speech. Should we be concerned that Islam is not on the agenda? Then we look at energy, where Iran fits into this really in the Middle East, with a focus away on Russian energy and where Iran fits this, and Iran's connections with the BRICS economy, that economic powerhouse, and what that means for the West. Does that mean a removal from the US's power and influence in the world? We touch on military, Iran firing its first hypersonic missile. What could go wrong with that? And then we end off looking at Islam itself as the ideology, its role, its place in America. Should we be concerned? We've talked a lot about Europe and its place, haven't touched so much on America. So what does that mean for America? A lot packed in. I know you love listening to Anni as she shares her insights on Islam and the geopolitical issues. Anni Cyrus, it's wonderful to have you back with us again. Thank you for your time today.
It is my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me back.
Not all. It's been nearly a year. I think you were back with last with us on July 2022, last year. Mass escape from Islam and why the West needs to wake up. And people can find that if they look back a year ago. And today, I think we want to look at why Islam is dropped off the agenda with so much focus on other issues, rightly so. I think the focus has come off Islam. So we want to delve into that, but people can find you at Anni_Cyrus on Twitter. You're elsewhere. Get her Instagram, everywhere else, and liveuptofreedom.com is the website. Of course, you're on Lindell TV. Where's the best place to catch you, Anni?
liveuptofreedom.com. That would be the place where you find all the other links, all the videos, either my own shows or my appearances on other programs. liveuptofreedom.com is the best place to go.
Okay, well, the viewers and listeners can go there. No, as I said at the beginning, Islam has slipped off the agenda with the focus on, I guess, COVID tyranny that we've all faced, the focus on China, and rightly so, as being one of the biggest threats to certainly the US and the world. I think our attention is focused on that and off Islam. I'm wondering, first of all, am I right to be concerned for that change of focus?
Oh, most definitely. I've been concerned since day one when I just started noticing the shift, which, of course, in America, it started from 2020 election and then the COVID situation and then the vaccine mandates and on and on and on. Yes, because I have always said Islam is like cancer. You want to monitor it at all time. No matter what comes up, you still get your annual checkup. And that's the thing. It's still pretty much as much of an enemy to human society as it was 2 days ago, 2 years ago, and 20 years ago. But sadly, as you said, it's being kind of faded away, or not enough attention is being paid to Islam, or as I call it, the green side of the red-green axis. So yes, it's still very much there, the same way it was before COVID happened, before everything else started happening. It's still there.
And tell us about you, because you touching on many other things, but you've still kept your major focus on your concerns of Islam, on the clash that we have between the freedoms that Islam takes away and the dominant place that it is bringing to the West. What is it like for you as you keep sounding the alarm on that issue?
I would say for last year and a half, I do feel like I'm just screaming in the forest. No, nobody's listening. Okay, I shouldn't say nobody, but majority of people aren't even listening. And again, I understand. When you don't see September 11 happening, you might think the danger is over. When you see so many Muslims are being elected in different countries for different positions, you're like, well, they learn to coexist. So I understand why most people wouldn't listen. But it is very frustrating because I see the writing on the wall. I follow all the news from Middle East and the Islamic countries. I see the involvement of Western countries that are literally enabling more and more power for countries like Islamic Republic of Iran. And I can see it, I can feel it. I just don't tend to be able to get people to understand equal amount of time and attention is needed for stopping this very smooth underground movement of Islamization.
I want to get into the geopolitics, as you mentioned, on Iran and other parts, but certainly over the last 12 months, I've been in the US a lot and been probably three different major conferences, including the NCPAC. And Islam simply wasn't on the agenda. And you listen to all the speeches, all the issues, and they're all absolutely important, essential. We need to understand. But Islam wasn't on it. And that's more probably looking at it from a political point of view, and it doesn't seem to be there. I mean, what are your thoughts as you look on the political discourse on this?
Well, let me start here. One of the main reasons that you don't hear much about Islam from politic aspect of life, if you put it that way, in any country, especially United States of America, UK, Canada, um, it's the fact that you cannot no you do not want to be labeled as Islamophobe while you go, let's say, Congress. You go on the floor and you got Muslims like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib is standing there. That awkward moment needs to be avoided because we are the Western countries that have the spoiled behavior mentality. We want to avoid conflict, we want to avoid confrontation, we want to avoid possibly being removed from our positions, losing that fancy paycheck we have, so we will look the other way. That's on that angle. But as far as the events such as CPAC or DNC or any of them, there are two problems. Number one, again, you don't want to lose funding. You don't want to lose the sponsors, and you also don't want to start receiving bomb threats on your events, because then people won't show up. If somebody said, I remember in 2018, I had an event somewhere in Minnesota, and the morning of the event, we received call that, well, there's a bomb threat on the church, you're about to show up. I'm like, I'm still showing up. The church said, we're still going to let you show up. But guess what? People didn't show up.
Yeah.
Speaker showed up, the venue stayed in place, but the audience didn't show up because they weren't going to risk their life to learn about this danger. So you put all of that together, it becomes to where they will, I'm not saying they're doing the right thing. Maybe they shouldn't do what they're doing. They shouldn't avoid talking about it. For example, when Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar or Obama or Keith Ellison or any of them that come out, as of right now, we have 218 Muslim practicing Sharia members inside United States of America's government, from locally all the way to federal government offices, 218, and we're willing to not chase after any of them, to call them out on their anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-human behavior or requests such as Ilhan Omar's blasphemy, anti-Islamophobia bills that she's trying to push. Because they either don't want to lose their head, because when you chase after Islam, when you expose Islam, you automatically will have a bounty that's going to be taken from Quran 9:5. Behead them wherever you find them. So most people prefer to keep their life, I guess.
I understand that from a human point of view. I get that, but as you certainly and we are trying to do is seek truth and speak up on injustices that you find. But looking at the geopolitical side of it, I guess with the move away from Russian energy and and Biden's move away from U.S. energy, where they're seeming to cut their nose off, spite their face, and I guess, a reliance on other countries, and into that steps Iran. Do you think, have you seen Iran gain legitimacy because the West is desperate for other sources and seemingly not looking at those sources underneath its own feet?
I wouldn't say they are gaining or they won't gain legitimacy, but I will say this. Considering I strongly believe all of this was orchestrated, all of these walkaways were orchestrated Because at the end of the day, there's this very, very, very old saying by forgive me as I draw a blank on her name every time I want to say her name, but it was Israel's prime minister who said, as long as mullahs are in charge of Middle East, the Western powers will become more powerful. On that note, they had to give more power to mullahs. Now, when we say mullahs, we're not just talking about the Iran's regime. We're talking about Taliban. We talk about ISIS. We talk about Al Qaeda. And I know most of your audience hopefully are aware that most of these little names of, the regime of Iran and the Taliban, they are all made by Western countries, specifically UK, France, and US. In order to regain that power that they needed, the chaos that needs to be in place in Middle East, they did what they did. US, the most disastrous, embarrassing withdrawal of our history from Afghanistan, handing it over to Taliban, having an agreement with Taliban. I covered this a while ago based on leaked documentations that United States of America signed an agreement with Taliban that we shall never attack Taliban. Now, we'll explain what happened at the airport. That's why our soldiers had a stand down order in Afghanistan that very day, because we have made a promise to never attack Taliban as long as they're in power. Now, this agreement was signed in February of 2020. February of 2020. Way before Taliban even took power. So for anybody who thinks Taliban just jumped on an opportunity and took Afghanistan, no. The agreement was signed way before we even decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. Iran, yes, sanctions are lifted. We're just about to give them another $17 billion frozen asset between China and Iraq. No, sorry, not China. South Korea and Iraq. And we had to walk away from all of these energies so we could pretend like we're giving legitimacy to Iran to start becoming our source for the lack of energy we need. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And you mentioned you did I think a video just a few days ago on that US and Iran can reach a deal soon on release of frozen funds. Talks between Iran and US and the release of Tehran's frozen assets could result in a deal. And you mentioned 10 billion. To most viewers, listeners, that would sound crazy. Why would the US be doing a deal with Iran? Who does that benefit? What purpose is it for? I mean, explain to us, as you see, why that is happening and how that benefits anyone.
So let me go back to what I just said. The Prime Minister of Israel is saying, as long as mullahs are in power in the Middle East, the Western countries become more powerful. So September of last year, there was an uprising in Iran. People of Iran got tired of this tyranny. They started an uprising that turned into a full-on revolution. And the government or the regime of Iran started becoming very desperate in all shapes and forms. It was time for their current ally, being United States of America, or more specifically Biden regime, to come to rescue. The more funding available for the regime of Iran, the better they can stay in control, if you call it. And that's what it did happen. The first release of $8 billion that we did for them back in, I believe, February or late January, today, you notice that the revolution has died down. It has slowed down. 32,000 Iranians in prison as political prisoners. Every morning, 2 to 3 Iranians are being hung and executed for blasphemy or propaganda against the regime, or being a spy for Israel. What you name it. They pick your title, whatever. And the regime is staying in power again, currently. So to answer your question of who's going to benefit from this would be the mullahs and the regime of Iran. And furthermore, the Biden regime, or also we can say the elite, we can say the globalist. Again, I don't really have a specific title for them. How did they benefit from this? As United States of America has been a target for a very long time. And I don't mean a couple of years, I mean decades. United States of America had to be taken down. The best way to describe this is how my boss, Jamie Glazoff, put it in one of his books, United in Hate, where the left likes to burn America down and build their own deluded utopia on the ashes left behind. Islam has always been the best tool to burn down anything, Because when Islam comes in, they strip you of your culture, your language, your mentality, your personality, your humanity. Everything goes away. That's why red green axis started, because the red knew there is no way they can easily conquer any of the modern civilized Western countries because we're aware of history. That's when Islam came in to do the job for them. And not to give you too much of a preacher, a long history lesson, but bottom line is those who would like to change our lives as free countries will benefit from this deal. Because the more money the regime, the more they stay in power, the more they can finance all the jihad attacks, more of their, sleep cell can be imported into countries like UK and US and Canada. When the time is right, they just start their major attack, which I have estimated it within a year. By the time the next presidential election is done in America is when we will see a series of coordinated jihadist attack in United States, big cities, schools, and churches.
Because obviously the argument from Sleepy Joe would be that, and probably for most of the West, is that all you need is to help those poor Islamic countries that are suffering, and if we can give them an economic boost, then we can all be friends and we can have global peace. You're saying that's that the way to fix this is not necessarily economic.
No. Here's a few things, by the way. We don't call him a Sleepy Joe anymore. We call him a Slippery Joe.
It's true.
So now that being said, that's been clear. Seriously, this guy slips a lot, doesn't he? Anyway, a Slippery Joe can have that argument, but as far as having, the argument of the best way to stop Iran from having nuclear weapon is diplomacy. That's what the talking point of Blinken has been. But there are a few problems. Number one, Iran already has the nuke. Netanyahu did a seminar and he showed all the documents. Iran has nuke already. So there is no goal of stopping Iran from having nuke. So that's right there. The second part is if we do this and this and that, as Obama started, that hope for peace. If you study the behavior of any of the 50 countries that is led by Islam, meaning the constitution of the country is Islamic Sharia, you come to realize, considering there is no peace involved in the cult itself, you can't expect any peace from the leaders of the cult either. That's just, again, diluted utopia, diluted peace. Now, it's kind of funny, but I do sometimes say, if you look at the language of Islam, which is Arabic, the letter P doesn't exist. How do they claim peace? If they can pronounce it, I'll accept it. Because they don't have Pepsi in Arabic countries. They have Pepsi. And they don't call my language Parsi. You all know as Iran's language is Farsi. Our language is not Farsi. It's Parsi. When it was conquered by Islam, they turned it into Farsi because they couldn't pronounce Parsi. So if any of them can pronounce peace, I'll accept it from them. I know this seems like a very tiny thing that is irrelevant, but the lies start from right there, and it goes all the way to Biden saying, this is for the sake of human society. We need to unfreeze all these assets, give them more money so they can, become peaceful. It's the same scenario of if you take away your Second Amendment, bad guys are not going to have guns anymore. That's how much sense this deal is making to us right now.
Obviously, the economic side that I've seen the whole BRICS countries coming together, and I think I read that Iran's trade with BRICS exceeded 34 billion in 11 months. And it seems though Iran are finding bedfellows with Brazil and Russia and India, China, South Africa, and that is growing. Does that take away the power of the US? Obviously, they're not punishing Iran. They want a trade with Iran, but Iran and other Islamic countries, I guess, will be becoming part of this new global economic bloc that really disposes America's place in the world.
Well, the thing is that they have that ability thanks to US right now, because part of the sanctions that were lifted originally in October of 2021 was this very deal you're talking about. their ability to be part of this huge boost of economy for them. Does it take away the power from people of America to have any hope to push back against Iran's regime? Yes. But from the elite, again, the Biden regime, no, it actually gives them more leverage because the more powerful the Iran regime becomes. I don't know if you followed that part, but September of last year, when it was the first time ever, Ebrahim Raisi, the current president of Iran, landed in New York with his own private government jet in New York airport, is when I said, fellow Americans, wake up. 44 years ago, at the Iran Tehran cemetery, Khomeini said, let the plan begin. We will take down the great Satan America and we will wipe Israel off the map. Today, we have Ebrahim Raisi, known as Butcher of Tehran, under investigation for crimes against humanity, under personal sanction by government of United States of America, just landed in New York. What power? There is no power left. Not for us. They have gained all the power. The alliance has been completed. But the question is again, are people listening?
What about the military side? I mean, Iran are a economic power. I mean, what's nearly 100 million people. It's a powerful entity in terms of mass and numbers, and it's been working on its military. I think I read recently about them unveiling their first hypersonic missile in challenge not only to the West but in Israel. We'll touch on Israel a bit, but that growing, I guess, military supremacy that Iran have, and Iran seemed to be, I guess, ahead of other Islamic countries, probably because the US have partnered closely with other Islamic countries up now, where Iran have been held as a more pariah state. But as they're welcomed in, I mean, it's frightening to anyone who cares about freedom to see Iran having military capability of hypersonic missiles, which means that's beyond the capability of America to actually defend itself.
Well, that's true. And here's the thing, Iran and Russia, since the Ukraine crisis, no, let me do that. Since the Ukraine crisis, Iran and Russia have created this very strong alliance as far as military equipment goes, right? And then right before that, when we left Afghanistan, remember, the United States of America's military left about $85 billion equipment behind. Taliban got those equipment, and more than 70% of it was sold to Iran. And they started using the technology, either replicating or using the technology to advance their military equipment. This is all within a year and a half, getting close to 2 years. Comes August, is 2 years. So yes, I understand, especially my fellow Americans, they do not like it when I say this. But the reality is, if Iran decides to wipe Israel off the map tomorrow, they have the capability right now. And that is why last week there was a release that when the United States of America's representative decided to meet with Oman's president to turn Oman into the new middleman between Iran and America, because Qatar was the middleman before. Some of the officials of Israel were aware and they hoped for the best. Because even the Israeli government is very well aware that since they're not going to do because here's the thing, Israel also has what it takes to go up against Iran. But as we both know, the Israeli government isn't going to do that. Yeah. They're so worried about their image, they are not going to make the first move. I actually said it once and I received a lot of backlash. So don't attack Peter if you don't like what I'm about to say. Come attack me on my page. But the point is, how many times have you heard of Israeli government almost cornering Hamas and then receiving a phone call from America to say ceasefire? And they're like, ceasefire. They are not going to do this. Most of people out there, unfortunately, anti-Semitism is on the rise, and it's the most practiced inhuman act. I'm not sure what they're worried about. I don't think their image could get any worse than it is already in the world. but they're not going to attack. So they go behind our representatives like, best of luck, go get them. They're going to sign an agreement with you. That's where we're at. So yes, Iran can hit New York from Iran. They have what it takes to hit New York tomorrow. But again, unfortunately, while they're doing that, we're training our military members here. With all due respect to everyone who has served this country, I owe you my life. But the new generation of our military is, let me wake up in the morning and decide which bathroom I'm going to feel like using. That's how we're going to defend ourselves.
Tell us about, because you mentioned Israel. How does Israel fit in this? Because it seems as though the West are empowering nations that have been a threat to Israel, have been a threat to stability and peace in the Middle East. And Israel being, I guess, the big dog with the military power and the economic power, have held that peace in the Middle East. But with a strong Iran, one focus you have on the threat against the US, but as you touched on, it's the threat against Israel. I mean, what do you, as you've watched that happen, what are your thoughts on how that actually could affect that stability?
Well, I wouldn't agree that Israel has, helped the peace in Middle East. The reason I wouldn't agree is, for example, on a biased note, September of last year there's an uprising. By November there's a full-on revolution in Iran, and everybody knows for a fact that there are more than enough Mossad members in Tehran by itself that could have just give the very last help to Iranian people, which is weapons and fighters, to overthrow the regime. That didn't happen. When Netanyahu was back in office, he released a video making promise that he's with the people of Iran. Well, we appreciate the words, Bibi, but are you actually gonna do something? No. You're just gonna release more videos just like Biden regime did, and all the rhino members of our government here, we are with the people of Iran, but then tomorrow we're gonna release $8 billion frozen assets so the regime can have more weapon to shoot and kill people on the streets of Tehran. So on that note, I don't see necessarily Israel holding the peace, but I do believe Israel is playing mid-ground with all parties involved. Do I know the politics behind it? No. Do I know why they're doing it? Absolutely not. Well, I do, but I rather not mention that yet on air. But the point is, if Israel would take control of their own country, their own military, their own people, and stop listening to America, for example, Middle East could be in absolute peace. Because the only thing it takes for Middle East to come to absolute peace, it might even modernize itself because it has a smart people, rich culture, almost 3,000 years of music. All it takes is to remove the mullahs from Iran. And Israel has what it takes to do that. They haven't done it yet. So I can't give you a better answer than I really pray that Netanyahu comes to who he was 7, 8 years ago, takes control, and instead of just making a bunch of threats, take action. People of Iran, inside Iran and outside of Iran, we have made it very clear we will appreciate either Israel or America to step in and set us free. So it's not like they're worried about Iran turning into Iraq or Afghanistan. Iran is neither of those. Iran is not Syria. Iran is a very rich country by nature, and people of Iran are standing by asking for foreign help right now. All it takes is for one of these countries to actually answer the call. And then you can watch peace flow all over Middle East.
I guess it's the chance for Benjamin Netanyahu to actually put his foot down, because he has been on the political scene for so long in Israel, regain power. He's not going to be leader of Israel forever. He's not going to lose and win another election. Therefore, it's his chance to stamp his authority.
And let me mention one more thing before we, just in case if we move on from this. Recently, a historic day took place in Israel. The Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, made a visit to Israel. After 44 years, the son of the last king of Iran made a visit to Israel as an official prince of Iran. He reached out and he announced that if we receive any support for him to gain power back in Iran, they can count on Iran to become their ally once again. We have gone that far to give Netanyahu all the approval he would ask, including the current prince who has 90% of Iranian people's vote to come back, and he has never been decrowned. So technically, he is still our crowned prince. He made a visit 2 weeks ago and pretty much said, "You can count on us to become your ally once again if you help us take the country back."
Going on specifically to Islam itself, we touched on the geopolitics, but Islam itself, we are seeing, and we probably touched on this when we spoke a year ago, but a rise certainly within Europe, in many of our metropolitan areas, with Brussels being 30% Islamic, Paris being probably 15 to 18%, London being about 15%, and a big growth, massive demographic changes. Certainly in the UK, we've seen Islam growing at 10 times the speed than the national general population. Do you want to give us a thoughts on, in the US, what it is like? Because it doesn't seem to be such a threat in the US. And then, of course, the fear is the lawmakers sit back and think, actually, this is maybe a European problem, but isn't a US problem.
Oh, it's most definitely a US problem. The reason you see it as more threat in Europe is because none of the European countries have our constitution. Therefore, if one person, for example, criticizes Islam or shows a picture of Muhammad, there will be a massive backlash and it will be reported. Whereas in America, due to our constitution and what's left of our freedoms to practice, we get to do more of pushback and it doesn't seem as chaotic as Europe. However, as I said, if you think about the numbers, so supposedly 1.2% of American population are Muslim. 1.2, right? That's very tiny. But they have 218 representatives all across the country. Does that look like a minority to you? No, it doesn't. So when it comes to America, you got to look at the crisis a little differently. For example, we have situations in America where you have the school district in Michigan forcefully feeding every single kid at school halal meat. No one has pushed back because they don't want to be Islamophobe, right? So they're allowing their kid to eat the halal meat, which is okay. No, not okay. I actually really hate the taste of halal meat. It is dry because they dried meat. Anyway, but the problem is when they pay for their kids' food, they're also funding jihad because part of the halal meat requires Islamic taxes. Where does the Islamic tax go? Part of it goes to jihad. So these are the little small tiny ways that we're facing issues here. But as I said, because of Biden regime, because of economy, because of fake crisis of Second Amendment, you barely notice it. But they have grown a lot more in America. During the evacuation of Afghanistan, as I covered, more than 65,000 Afghans were lifted, brought to America. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are because at some point we just open all the gates of all the military bases. We're like, welcome to America, get out there. Later on, almost 100 of them ended up having ties to Islamic terror. Recently at the border, we're arresting Islamic soldiers coming in. So it's just a bigger country, I guess, with a bigger population, with a little bit more freedoms for us to fight back. But the crisis here is, if not worse, but just as bad as Europe.
And is it just in pockets or across? Because obviously in Michigan, it has a large Muslim population. Other places as pockets. I mean, is it an issue just in terms of states, or should it be one that lawmakers across the country take it seriously?
It is not per state because right now across America, every single state does have mosques. And I don't mean a mosque, mosques, depending on the size of the state. Some states are farther conquered, but every state is having the issues of Islamization. And when you have Congress, again, going back to Ilhan Omar's pressure on anti-Islamophobia bill, that is a federal law that she's trying to make happen. That means the entire country needs to pay attention. You might have less Muslim here and more Muslim over there, and whatever the case might be. But when they're pushing for federal laws against our freedoms to protect Muslims, then it is a nationwide problem.
What's the? We've seen very few politicians across Europe being vocal. Those who have been vocal live under armed guard, and I guess that's a warning. Are there politicians in the US that are vocal and see this as a legitimate threat to US freedoms?
As of right now, no. We don't have. I can't think of anyone who is vocal about the problem. I mean, there was a time when they would at least say, radical Islam, but they don't even say that anymore right now. Now, you need to keep in mind, I don't necessarily think they're not talking about it because they don't want to talk about it, is that the division in our government has never been as bad as it is today. There was a time when it was a party line, Democrats versus Republicans. Now you have so many divisions. You got the socialist liberals, and then you have the progressive liberals, and then you have the Democrats, you have the traditional Democrats, and then you have the conservatives, and then you have the rhinos, you have the far right, you have the Republican. There is just too much chaos for anyone to pay attention to. Well, we should talk about Islam issues in America. It's just, unfortunately, the attack from within has been successful enough that they're just letting it be. I personally, when I had Congressman Jim Jordan on my program, I did bring up the Iran deal with him, and he did the best he could to respond to, what are you going to do about it part. But with every topic we talked about, it didn't seem as anyone is concerned, including Jim Jordan, about the Islamic attack or the Islamic issue. Everybody was worried about, and to an extent, I understand, Hunter Biden's laptop and Biden family crimes and, China and COVID and vaccine and all that. But again, unfortunately, as we said at the beginning of this program, nobody's realizing that the less you pay attention to the green part, the stronger the green part will come to.
And I guess maybe to finish off with, an institution which you'd expect to speak up is the church, and we have certainly seen a silence and a fear of the church in the UK. And I don't know whether the church really exists in any strong shape across the rest of Europe. But what's it like in America? Is the church vocal against that clash that Islam brings, which is anti-Christian in everything, but also anti-freedom, or is there silence and fear?
I would take silences and fear over what they really do. More and more churches are actually joining the interfaith dialogue in America. More and more churches are sending their people to mosques to listen to imams preach Islam. More and more churches are coming to accept that the Jesus in the Quran is our Jesus. So they're actually selling us to Islam. Some of them very well aware, some of them based on being not educated on the topic of Islam, listening to the imams, believing their taqiyya, and actually thinking we can coexist. I mean, the biggest growing Chrislam movement is in the United States of America and Canada. And for those of your audience who may not know what Chrislam is basically believing the Jesus of Islam and claiming to be a Christian. Be a Christian who believes Muhammad was the last messenger and Jesus was not but a messenger who came to spread Islam. That's Chrislam.
And we are seeing similar. I don't know where in the UK it's simply because churches are afraid and don't want controversy and simply want to exist, or whether they actually believe that. It's a curious mix that we are seeing in the UK.
That's the thing. I think it is. I don't think all of them know what they're getting themselves into. I do believe some of them are flat out receiving the payment and going along with the game. Some of them might be afraid, and that was one of my biggest argument. I was turned away from a church based on my activities. I was rejected as a Christian because, as a Christian, I am not to judge, nor am I to, say the things I say about other people. And what I did tell that person who was turning me around, I said, it's okay. You can question my faith. That is your right. But I want you to know, as a leader, as a religious leader, I can tell you this much that as a pastor, you do not have the right to not defend your faith in order to stay alive. So if you want to judge me, go in the mirror and judge yourself first. You're to be killed if need to be while leading your people through the right path. What you're doing out of fear, when you tell me I don't need the drama that comes with you to my church, you're telling me that you're afraid of their threat. So a
Well,
lot of them do that.
Annie, I appreciate your input on this. It's a massive subject, and I know our viewers and listeners will benefit massively from your overview on the geopolitical side, but also on Islam as a separate entity and ideology. So, thank you so much for coming on and sharing today.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you, Peter.